Greetings, everybody. This is Dave Fortson. How are y'all? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. It's a beautiful day here. I'm in Santa Barbara, California, as always. It's unfortunately it's feeling a little warm. It's definitely getting warmer later in the season. It should be starting to turn pretty cool by now. Um, but it is, gorgeous evenings, but man, it feels like summer right now. It's kind of crazy. Hold on a sec. I'm just pulling up my colleague, Sarah. There she is. Good morning, Sarah. West Coast is the best coast. How is San Diego area?
Oh, it's good. It's beautiful out in the mountains this morning. A little cool. Like you're saying, it's starting to cool down, weather's starting to change. But yeah, just feeling really excited this morning to chat with you, Dave, and share with the community about all our progress and our marketplace launch. So, cup of coffee here in the morning, reminding me of all the places that coffee beans come from in the world and all of our connections to communities on the ground. So, good morning, y'all.
Morning, morning. Yes. And again, I think today I'm guessing, and we'll see if Gregory is also on the West Coast. He's rather occupied, as you can imagine, doing a bunch of different networking and socializing of all the regen ecosystem to the SoCap crew. So he may or may not be joining us, but at the least, Sarah and I are going to hold the torch today. And I think we can, I was thinking, use this a little bit of a mix of like AMA of the marketplace for those people who have questions. Um, Digging deeper into like what rolled out this week. I'd love to hear from people just if anyone tooled around at all. Did anyone buy a credit out there? Did anyone try or at least check out the user interface, user experience? Obviously there's improvements to be made, but we are also pretty excited with what we were able to get out for this first version of the marketplace. And then obviously we'll take a look at what's over the horizon, and always building here at Regen Network. So I think that'll be a fun exercise. But maybe just to start with, and also Ned, I see you out there. Actually, had some curiosity about Open Team. I think you were there, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I would love to hear at some point, assuming you were, how that experience was. If there's any takeaways, knowing that they've been a longtime partner of us and they had their event recently. But anyhow, why don't we dig in and talk about the marketplace? Sarah, you want to kind of walk us through the, kind of what happened in bringing the marketplace to launch, if there's any kind of backstory on any of the launch that might be interesting to share from like how do you bring something like this to market? Some of the decisions we had to make from a product perspective in order to bring an MVP of the marketplace live and ready. And also just I want to note that this is we're 5 years or five, 4 or 5 years into the development, and it's just fascinating to explain to people how long it takes to take a concept like Regen Network, which in its infancy was how do we value ecological assets, a long time ago, and in 2022 end of year we in some ways roll out our first legitimate product that at least for that the public can seamlessly interact with, and kind of the I guess it takes time, so I think it's a big thing to celebrate. It's also really interesting to see the story or to reflect back on it a little bit, and all the different roads we went down and turned around on or got blocked on at the end, and made different choices that actually led to the marketplace launch, which for those of us who've been around for a while was pretty momentous occasion, and clearly just the beginning of a whole series of products and uses of Regen Ledger and in the marketplace. So anyhow, I'm kind of getting off on meta here, but if Sarah, you want to drop in and kind of maybe ground us in how we arrived at the launch on Tuesday, and anything story-wise that you think might be worth sharing with the crew. And then obviously, if anyone's got any questions about anything on the marketplace, just feel free to request. We're going to keep this nice, loose, and easy today.
Cool. Thanks for that intro, Dave. Yeah, so the Regen Marketplace has launched in its sort of simplest way to find your way into the marketplace. You can go to app.regen.network. You can also find it from our webpage, and it's linked all over Twitter. So I definitely recommend going to the marketplace. So the kind of first question that I would pose if I didn't know what I was talking about is just, what is the marketplace? And why should I care? What is it for? What does it matter? And how does it Regen Marketplace, when you go to app.regen.network, it really is a user interface that allows anyone with a Kepler wallet to log in and individual user have access to the functionality of the Regen Ledger blockchain. So this is first and foremost a really important. What we've built is really a user interface that lets the native functionality and the core blockchain modules of Regen Ledger be functional and accessible to everyday people and companies that want to make climate impact. And so at this particular MVP, there's a couple of things that you're able to do in the system that are really unique, and a couple of things that are sort of expected for a carbon and ecological asset marketplace. The marketplace features that someone can use at this current version, is issuing credits, it's selling credits, doing sell orders, it's buying credits, it's transferring credits to another wallet, and it's retiring credits to, take responsibility for a carbon footprint personally or for a company. So for example, I've been slowly buying different city forest credits personally. Got my Axler USDC into my wallet according to the guides and made my purchases. And then some sell orders to test that functionality. And some of them I did some retirements to take responsibility for my carbon footprint. So I'm having fun playing around personally with the projects and the functionality. So that's a really quick basics of what can you do inside of the marketplace. But to kind of step back at a more meta level, it is really important to understand what we're building more today and how the marketplace as a series of features essentially serve that overall purpose. So what Regen Network is doing is not just making a place to buy and sell credits. We have an entire credit origination system and process that is natively on the blockchain. And the way that that functions at a fundamental level is very much like underneath the surface and involved in how you get to see the credits. But as someone who is just exploring the marketplace, you wouldn't necessarily know about all of this native functionality. So a simple example of that is city forest credits. In order for the city forest credits to be populated in Regen Network's marketplace, and had to go through a process of developing a credit class, which is really the asset issuance requirements for that particular methodology from the City Forest Credits Registry. They had to decide who was going to be the administrator of that credit class, who was going to sort of have the powers of changing and updating it, who would have the powers of creating credit issuer permissions inside of the system. And then they had to set a credit issuer permission to a particular wallet to be able to issue these credits that had been produced inside of their program that they wanted to have placed in our marketplace to be available for blockchain buyers. So underneath of the marketplace is really about creating market function and market accessibility, but it kind of has a twin inside of our system, which is the registry system, that really is where this functionality to me gets super interesting. And in the world of Regen Network, there's 40 plus methodologies being developed by scientists and community members and universities and farms on the ground across the world. And those are all going to be able to use this credit production system, this credit origination system, to bring those credits into the marketplace on their own terms, representing their own science, monitoring their own land. So this sort of first step is about giving basic functionality to every user and working, throughout this whole fall, saying, okay, what was all the feedback? We are, just so everyone in the community understands, we have a process of collecting every single piece of feedback, good and bad, that we have seen every single channel. So we want you to be vocal about what you love and what you would like to see changed. Because we're going to be spending the next couple of months really trying to fine tune this marketplace functionality, this marketplace user interface, working on getting more currencies into the marketplace so the purchase flow is easier, serving that process with our buyer's guide, really trying to tweak this so it's a really interactive, easily accessible, easily usable marketplace, because there are a ton more credit types coming. Some that may even come from these community developed projects by the end of the year. So this is really the first step in a much bigger movement towards evolving climate impact science, evolving how we issue ecological assets on blockchains in general. And in general, we see ourselves as an origination system, really providing the freedom of scientific thought to communities of practice and communities of science to drive what they think an evolution and climate monitoring science should be, and partnering them with the tools and processes to create assets that reflect where that type of work is actually implemented on the ground as trees are planted or rivers are cleaned. Because in the end, what we are trying to accomplish is a community governed registry and origination system that lets all land stewards around the globe have the opportunity to be part of systems and processes that restore land. So this is just the first tool. Maybe I'll
So
go back to you there, Dave. This is the first tool of a series of tools that make that vision really tangible and accessible for average, everyday people.
pardon me. So yeah, so I had a question actually I wanted to pick up on to give because I think it's the complexity of the ecosystem that we're developing, the community in order to originate a carbon credit asset or an ecological asset and have it show up on the marketplace and land in somebody's wallet is you know is really interesting to explore. And I was wondering if you might give us take us on a journey to give us an idea of like a farmer or land steward anywhere in the world has the idea of like I want to bring my land stewardship value to a market over in regen marketplace. And I wonder if you could just tie together a bunch of the I think loose story threads around how they do that, like from
Yeah.
the first idea, what's their first stop, what's their second stop, what is how does the foundation, the DAOs roll into this potentially, how do project developers potentially intersect here, how does the community governance show up, and when does a credit, at least under our current our current state of our product development, when does it when do we see that show up, and just to give people a sense of what makes Regen's whole approach unique as a public governed global ecological account system that has the ability to bring a credit to market. And I think we've chosen the architecture and almost the philosophical pathway to bring these credits to market. I think that would be just interesting to illuminate so people can start to see why we've invested so much time and energy into community building and into the endowment process and into just developing a comprehensive full stack community, if you will, that is not laser focused, but is looking to bring these assets to market.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a really clear example that's kind of like quick and literally my property that I'm physically, you guys don't know where I am, but I'm physically standing outside. I live in Southern California. So I'll just tell you what I'm going to be doing with my property with Regen once all the functionality is available for my use case. So, I'm an ecologist. I used to be a park planner, which means that I'm a nerdy plant person who is rapidly developing out ecological restoration gardens to create microclimates and habitats and water catchments and all kinds of other truly amazing, but definitely very dorky ecology and landscape management stuff. So what I'm doing right now, and what I would be doing in Regen if all the tools were available to me, is I made a map of where I started with my property and exactly what species I had where. I have a system of tracking all of the physical changes and new plants that I am planting on my property. And ultimately, what I will do is look in the Regen Network library of methodologies and say, is there anything in here that has components of my land and management activities where there's a methodology piece that I can learn from or use or just pick up and like directly apply to my property or a particular section of it, that represents how I would measure that change for myself or how I would want to be rewarded for implementing these practices that are ongoing land management practices. And an example of that is, maybe at a certain point I want to cover crop under vineyard rows.
Hi
Vineyards
all. I
that don't
can't hear
exist
Sarah
yet.
talking. If you could just give a
Oh,
thumbs up emoji.
can you hear me now, Dave? Dave, can you hear me? Dave, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, I think it might have been me.
Oh,
Thank you, Sarah. You're back.
I apologize, everyone. I'm not sure where I was at in that story, so maybe I'll make it briefer. The story I was trying to tell is basically I own land. I'm making improvements to this land. There are ecological benefits to my improvement. Knowing that, I would reach out to Regen Network, start with the registry and science teams, and look at what published or are being published into the methodology library and see what they're used from there, and then start to design credits that reflect my unique multi strategy approach of land management to my property that inherently is definitely sinking carbon, definitely holding water on site, and definitely changing the microclimates of the property that I own and steward here in California. And so there's a pathway that folks take as project developers or farming nonprofits to go through the scientific discovery of how do they really measure or how can they be rewarded for their practices that they're implementing on their land that have these benefits. And so those benefits are really identified, quantified, and packaged up. And those are what we talk about when we talk about eco credits. It might be biodiversity credits, it might be water quality credits, it might be carbon credits, it might have many different features of what types of benefits we're talking about. But eco credits really represent, outcomes or practices on a piece of land in a place around the world that is physically doing ecological restoration work. And that's really what our marketplace functionality is designed to serve, is to help people design those assets, do that science, do that monitoring, bring those credits to market, and hopefully find that there is a large group of buyers that want to purchase and retire their credits for climate impact projects. You were asking Dave a minute ago about the foundation and the broader governance, and I don't see Will on here anymore, I don't think, but I do think that it is important for folks to understand the difference between the features and functionality of the blockchain. The features and functionality of the blockchain are these Regen marketplace functions. It's this credit origination functions, but underlying all of that is the Regen Network governance token. And the governance token is really about all of us owning the systems and the tools and being co-designers of those systems and tools so that we can all govern the network of Regen as we work together to regenerate land ourselves or to create processes, systems, or support around those that are really trying to make ecological change on the piece of land around the world. So there's sort of the universal layer of network governance, and then there's the layer of features that exist on the blockchain And then there are some of these programs and processes that serve people's ability to use those technical features within applied landscape management scenarios. So maybe I'll stop there because that was a little bit just like technically complicated, Dave. And, I'd be interested in hearing like what people have to say about the marketplace, what questions they have for us. There are certainly some folks in the audience that, I see Ned from our team that can definitely speak to the science process more articulately than I am. So I just love to get a sense of like what questions and what opportunities can we create for other people's voices this morning.
Great. Well, we have Empower, excuse me, Empower, you had a question, and then I'll bring up JHS as well.
Hey, thanks for having me up here. Yeah, just kind of like a very generic question that I kind of ask everyone in this space in terms of like carbon credits and stuff. And it's kind of a big concern, I guess, for myself, but I'm kind of becoming a bit more, I'm getting a bit more into the space. So I'm kind of understanding things a bit more, but more so when I reach out to people who are in just the sustainability or impact space, sometimes communicating with them about things like carbon credits, these are kind of like the concerns that come up, right? So I guess, yeah, the major one would be, defining some sort of regenerative practice by purely the carbon sequestration. Is that enough? Is that, is that enough of a measurement of what you're regenerating, right? Because there's so many other factors that go into regenerating a piece of land that potentially just the carbon sink that you're creating isn't really accounting for the biodiversity and the nitrogen fixation and all of these kind of different aspects of the ecosystem, right? So how do you guys view carbon credits fitting into a more broader ecosystem rather than just I plant this tree because it sequesters X carbon and that's it? Like I'm not thinking about the rest of the of the cycle of this piece of land, right? So how do you guys kind of tackle, when speaking to people in just the traditional space and not in the carbon credits market? How do you guys approach that conversation, and how do you guys communicate the benefits as well as tackle those because they are actual challenges, right? Because something might sequester a lot of carbon, but it's not made for this ecosystem, so it's not actually the best fit for sequestering carbon in this certain region. So yeah, that's kind of my question for you guys.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Empower. Can you hear me, Dave? Yeah, I see myself talking here.
Yep, you're good.
I'm just making sure. Yeah, and our team member, if Ned's still on here, I'd love to hear Ned's opinion because Ned is a better scientist than I am. But I mean, the world of Regen Network, we really are a series of ecologists and scientists. And, at least half of our full-time team have spent significant portions of our career, like 10 plus years, working to restore land, like physically designing land restoration projects, implementing them, monitoring that evolution of that design over time. And so I think we naturally have an innate understanding that what we're trying to do is provide financial tools that allow for a broader analysis of landscape or ecological benefits. And so, yes, carbon is king. Carbon is king because of global carbon accounting and because of corporate demand for it. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop and create space for others to use the tools that we're developing to take a beyond carbon approach to this commodities market intersection. And we're really asking ourselves the questions at a broad ecological restoration level. If I plant this tree and I put these 5 symbiotic species around it that are appropriate for Southern California, for example, what types of species are going to actually come and interact in that microclimate that I'm developing? How am I, from these actions, really restoring ecological landscapes and creating habitat and cleaning water? So every piece of property that we work with, every physical project around the world, is really a unique location with unique communities and unique land management practices that they're applying to their specific landscape. And so we're trying to create a series of interoperable tools that allow them to look at the whole landscape from an ecological systems perspective, not just that, hey, check the carbon box or hey, check the water credit box. Those are really tools that take things to market so that those stewards can be rewarded, but isn't necessarily the primary way in which we choose to look at ecological data. So I see that Ned's up here. Ned, do you want to elucidate more because you work more with this?
Yeah, I can try. I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up pretty well. I mean, we're in the carbon markets now because it's sort of the low-hanging fruit. It's a relatively well-developed market, and it's where the buyers and the sellers are. But we are putting a lot of, I mean, most of my time actually is going into alternatives to carbon credits or alternatives to carbon markets. There's an initiative called the Environmental Stewardship Initiative that I'm working on, trying to figure out other ways to capture the kind of the holistic approaches to ecosystem regeneration. And I can go on to that, get into more detail if anybody's interested. But I mean, just to put it out there, if people are interested in this, we do have another meeting coming up next Tuesday. I think it's 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're interested in this ecosystem regeneration or environmental stewardship initiative, just send me a DM or email or whatever works, and I'll get you the information to join that meeting next week.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I definitely do want to join those meetings. I guess just a follow-up question. I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much of your time. Feel free to move on if it's not relevant. But how do you guys tackle in terms of the carbon market in terms of the buyer side? It's predominantly a lot of companies that emit a lot of carbon, CO2 into the atmosphere. So how does I feel like a lot of people who are in the space probably against dealing with those types of entities, right? So how would you tackle that? And if anything, how would you broaden that market so that it's not just attractive to these big corporations, but maybe to individuals or to companies that are just trying to invest in regenerative practices or invest into making the world a better place for the people, the animals, and the environment. So I guess how do you tackle the broadening of that buyer's market into not just institutional investors, but to typical people or just companies that want to make a difference?
Yeah, it's a great question. That real briefly, the history of Regen Network with buyers is on kind of like every level. A first example is we sold of all first 4 vintage projects to Microsoft as part of their moonshot goal in 2020. So we have experience with, liaisoning with like big corporate RFP processes. We also have had a ton of buyers that are very natively Web3, like NFT collections, dApps, protocol treasuries, protocol foundations, protocols offsetting their footprint even in proof of stake, validator offsetting. And we have a lot of partners and companies that I think are like, I would call small and medium, a lot of relationship to ag and food and kind of the industries that we come from into this work as a community at Regen Network. So it's really a wide variety of individuals. And I think from my perspective, having liaised with like every scale, including governmental and municipal buyer levels across the globe over the last 3 years with the team, is that I think that there's a lot of organizations that really genuinely do want to make a climate impact. They are really going through evaluating their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. They really are making changes to their operations to the best of their ability. And then they are finding that they have carbon footprints, and they go through these complex processes of looking at the science behind credits that are created, looking at the people and the place and the ecosystems and the stories associated. And a lot of people build these very customized carbon credit and ecological asset portfolios that are not just like checking that, I had 1,000 tons of carbon I had to deal with this year for my shareholders. People are digging much deeper on an emotional level. And I think it's because people are really broadly, as individuals, even if they work at a company, understanding that climate change and climate impact is real. and the choices that they make at every juncture as businesses and humans really can affect, whether we have a livable planet with 1.5 degrees of warming or not. So it's really a wide variety of individuals. I'm happy to answer more questions about it, but we have relationships at all kinds of different levels with different people. And I think the unifying principle to me is climate change is real, doing something is good. I want to look at the details of these different projects to decide which projects and which communities that we want to invest in, not just which credits check the box.
So why don't we jump over to JHS, and then we'll head over to Neil. So go ahead.
Hey, it's Jan. Hey, everyone. Yeah, just thought I'd give you a little bit of feedback from using the marketplace. And because, first of all, I like it. It's a very good first version. All the functionality is there. No problems finding anything or understanding what the user is doing in the marketplace. I thought I'd give maybe two comments. One is on what we've just talked about in terms of user base of carbon buyers, institutional versus small scale. I would actually argue that the marketplace, as it was released just 2 days ago, is more for small buyers, because you can easily, choose your project, get involved, reading about the background, and then buying your typical yearly offset for a family, right? In that range. Somebody who's buying 100,000 tons, currently the interface would not be geared for that, and because you have to piece it together, right? So I'm assuming, and this is my first question, the things like if somebody like Microsoft came again and wanted to buy 200,000 tons, you would probably do that deal OTC or behind the scenes, or would you envision them using the marketplace?
Ooh, these are my favorite types of questions, which is why I'm glad I went to the audience. And good morning, Jan. Nice to hear from you again. Yeah, I agree with you. I was looking, and this is just my personal opinion, because I'm kind of our trading desk by default. We haven't issued all the credits in this portfolio. We've issued a slice of them. So there's more of them there than are listed. So just if anybody is looking for volume, hit me up. My DMs are open. I think the challenge with the way we designed it is that it is consumer facing, and it had to do with just the flow of blockchain user wallet functionality and wanting to keep it really simple. But I know I would love to have the ability to filter the projects by all of their features like vintage and project type and all of that to cross compare, and have the capacity to build a cart that is waiting for me. Because if I'm a corporate buyer, I'm building a portfolio and I'm really looking at price decisions, I'm looking at volume decisions, I want to be able to quickly filter for what's in the portfolio, what's on the marketplace that does fit my portfolio criteria that was probably decided long before, I started looking for credits, for example. So I think that there is some functionality and some design shifts that we could do to make that more accessible to corporate buyers. And I ultimately think that as more credit types come online, that shopping experience will be a lot easier. And I've had a lot of conversations with small to medium sized carbon credit, purchasing counters, I guess is maybe the way I would think about it. Organizations that quarterly are looking for 10,000 to 25,000 credits. It's not the Microsoft scale, but they go through these long processes of reaching out to projects one by one, of working with brokers, and the ability to just log in, filter through our projects, pick the ones they want, and go to checkout without having to deal with, frankly, anyone. I actually think it has the capacity, as that portfolio grows and that functionality expands, to actually be a much better experience for those small and medium-sized companies that really just don't have the financial capacity to work with the middlemen in the industry at large. So I'd love to hear other feedback. So I think this is great. I love when people point things out, and I'll definitely make a note of that.
No, let's not forget it launched 2 days ago, and congratulations on that. So there's it. Where do you channel the efforts and get feedback and everything? I do have a quick second thing, because I found it stood out a little bit because there was also one or two comments on Twitter about this, and that is the price. So I had the impression that, somebody who's been in refi regen, but doesn't know that much about the carbon market, there might be people coming over. They've seen, they might be maybe bought some BCT or NCT, so they have seen the price of a carbon ton all the way down at $3, $4, $6 or so, right? So then to see what is actually a normal price in the carbon market of $25, $30 upwards, right? Now we are going into that topic of how do you convey quality? Because that's what it in the end is, right? You're paying these prices because these are very different projects that are worth it, or they need to charge that amount. So this is an open-ended question. I don't think there's an easy solution, but I think in the end that is the. I saw a couple of comments that had that question: why is it $40 a ton? And so then for a product to, how do you make sure that people understand? Just like when you go on Amazon, you find the same thing and or a basic product. One is called deluxe version and one is not, so you immediately understand why that one costs $10 more. Now, how do you do that with carbon?
I have a quick thought, and then I'd love to get more of your opinion, Sarah. I think this speaks to almost out of the gates, and I don't know, I think somewhat intentionally, of in some ways decentering carbon and up-leveling the co-benefits and I guess nature-based premium credits out of the gate. Again, whether design or by chance, you're right. We don't have a bunch of NCTs selling at $2.50 sitting on the marketplace. Although, those are coming pretty soon to osmosis, and there'll be a regen NCT pool, which I think will be exciting. But on the flip side, I think we're trying to get across to the market as a whole, and actually kind of calls into question in a lot of ways our approach as a community and as Regen Network development, as our communications internally, is our role in doing just what you're saying of how do we express to a market, to at the same time acknowledge commodification of carbon, but also the bigger picture of creating healthy ecosystems, bioregionally in places that matter, and that the cost of doing that is going to be higher than 250, right? And it should be. I mean, we need these ecological assets sitting at a price that recognizes their importance to the environment, and be able to communicate that in a way that does it fall along the lines of organic versus conventional, or regenerative versus conventional food, or supply chain products. How do we differentiate for a market that's often going to look for price at the bottom line, and acknowledge that and be able to address that in a marketplace, but also on the daily, communicate the holistic value of ecological assets, the stories of the people behind them, and really bring and infuse deep value into this, and help people understand that these types of carbon credits, the urban forest credits to begin with, really are a great advancement and evolution of what the ecological asset market can be, where we're helping, in this case, local communities in cities where urban trees play a critical role in fundamental health and happiness of a city, its health, ecological health, and actually, yes, they also sequester carbon. So anyhow, I've been thinking about this also as like a communications professional, about the unique inflection point we just hit within Regen in turning into a product marketing communication focus, as we all of a sudden are going to be bringing all of these really different feeling, more expensive probably, ecological assets to a market that may be like sniffing around for, hey, I just need to get the cheapest thing on the market, and and being okay with that, but more importantly, celebrating and being able to sell unique, custom, bioregionally generated ecological assets that, when purchased, you can trust that they materially impact more than just some, element on the, periodic table. So anyhow, that's my rant. Sarah or others?
I think that was a solid rant, Dave. I would also add to this, really to kind of hammer this home, like, yeah, they're $40 a pop. They're not cheap. There's a couple of like positioning points that are deliberate about this. One, the City Forest Credits portfolio, frankly, looks a lot like the types of stuff that is going to come through the Regen Registry program and be issued in the Regen Network marketplace. So that's smaller volume, really very high quality, very unique projects, very limited number of them in the world for complex restoration work. And I think that we're in a bear market. There is a war. Everything is undervalued in the marketplace right now. Carbon prices in general have been very depleted. But it's important for folks to remember that part of the reason that the prices for BCT and NCT are so low has to do with, the fact that Vera stopped the bridging. And so there are assets in the blockchain in NCT and BCT that aren't attached to demand and can't reach demand. They're demand constrained. And so their prices have dropped both from the bear and from sort of the lack of use of them. So there is something unique happening with that pricing, but overall, we believe that carbon projects should be complex. They should be designed and governed by communities of practice, and that the stewards involved should be receiving funding that more than just covers the cost of their stewardship and their land implementation. It should be a financially regenerative equation because the work they're doing is hard and because the value that their work has to all of us, it's critical to planetary, function and survival at a macro level. I do anticipate, though, that we are bringing NCT over Regen Ledger to Bridge. There will be more affordable assets in our marketplace for people that are looking for more volume. And there really over time will be a wide variety of asset types, asset volumes, and asset prices. So that if I'm a company trying to, get 1,000 credits, the way I advise people is, yes, you have a budget and every effort for climate change is important. So lots of companies have to stick within their budgets. But I also think it's nice for them to deliberately buy some of the higher priced credits as a way of investing in what they wish they could afford and investing in some of these complex ecosystem restoration projects that just really are very, very high quality in comparison to some of the other credit types that do exist in the market around the world. So I'll pass back to you about that, Dave, and we can see other questions folks got.
I'll pick up one thing, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Neil and try to get through. I see Farouk, and how I see you. I may just need to get some other folks ahead of you, but stand by. I think just to put a point on this example, we had this week one of the TBD if it's going to happen, but one of the biggest rock stars in the world reach out to us specifically for these city forest credits because of the story and because of their uniqueness, and that they were very much US based. They were clearly focused on urban areas, and and it was just striking to me that it was immediately they picked up on that, the story behind that, and and then obviously some level of trust in Regen to consider offsetting their entire tour using those credits, which one I thought was exciting. And on the flip side, and I think again it's no less valuable, we had a organic skincare company who's looking to meet their climate goals in carbon offsetting scope. I think it was like scope 1, scope 2, or scope, I don't know which scopes, but anyhow, they were like comprehensive offsetting, and they were looking for the least expensive nature-based carbon credits. And we have a product for them. They were more budget conscious. They're a smaller outfit with not a lot of extra spending capital, but are still looking for some level of integrity in a product that that may not cost as much, but still offers them the ability to authentically tell their community that they're doing the right thing in carbon offsetting, and that they're finding a product that they can assure their community is nature-based in its carbon sequestration. So I think we get both. I think we're going to get both ends of the spectrum. I think we're prepared to serve both ends of the market, and probably most excited to be able to tell the stories of the unique bioregional ecologically generated assets that are going to really stimulate the global carbon sequestration that we need to address climate change. So I'll stop there. Neil, thank you. You've been patient. What's on your mind?
Hey folks, I've actually only got a couple minutes because I'm about to start 2 days of meetings with UNEP's WCMC, that's the World Conservation Monitoring Center, and a group called Nature Metrics, which is a leading eDNA company. And one of the main parts of our agenda is standardizing a metric for biodiversity credits as a standalone product. And I don't have time to get into this with you because I'm literally leaving in 3 minutes. But carbon is such an easy thing comparatively. It's a ton, right? Everyone understands a ton with a little bit of, thinking and education about it. But standardizing biodiversity is so much more complex because you've got overall ecosystem health. You have some kind of baseline, assuming with a given site being managed or a given landscape being managed. And so there's a lot more complexity there. And I'd be really interested in following up with all y'all on what's a standard metric that any given company or any given land manager could use to communicate changes in biodiversity in a way that it is, palatable and simple, right? Is it a number that represents something? Is it a series of metrics that are bundled together somehow? So I'm going into 2 days of meetings on that subject, starting in about 2 minutes. But I want to float that because I think it's relevant to the CCB kind of bundling and relevant to the emergence of what to date is a latent biodiversity market. So I'll throw that question out and then I'm going to leave.
Thanks, Neil. Sarah, you want a quick spot on that? And then Ned, obviously that you have some thoughts here. And then after that, I'm going to jump over to Ed and then to Farouk.
Yeah, I would say have fun, Neil, and keep us in the loop because there are definitely other folks in the community having these kind of biodiversity approach conversations. I bet Ned knows more about those than I do, but I think when you come back, Neil, we could have a whole debate here on Twitter Spaces about what that should look like, and that would be really cool.
Ned, any reflections?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of taking that approach to come up with a biodiversity metric. I don't think it's really possible or sensible. I don't even think, carbon as a climate change metric is very good. And with biodiversity, coming up with a biodiversity metric, it's going to be even, like you say, it's incredibly complex. If they're going to try to do something, it's going to have to be a composite of different indices. And that composite should be tailorable to different ecosystems, ecoregions, and things like that. This is a big topic, and it's one that I put a lot of thought into, and I would love to talk to people that are interested in this, and it'd be good to get some conversations going. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what comes out of this WCMC meeting or group discussion.
Well, it sounds like there's a good pickup here, topic, standard, and we've been hearing a lot about this across, multiple protocols, literally from the technical and language perspective, as well as, more practical, biodiversity metrics or standards. So maybe we pick this up as its own Twitter space. I do like the concepts. I'm sure there is a mile deep we can go on this topic. So let's put a pin in that. Ed, how can we help you?
Thanks, folks.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I mentioned last week that Farm Green, which is a farmer in Indiana, does a podcast, and he had Lance Gunderson and Rick Haney. and they represent the Regen Ag Lab that's located in Nebraska. Rick Haney used to work for USDA, and he left there this spring to work more independently, and he's joined their lab. And they don't have a recording available yet. It's in the middle of harvest season, but it was really an exciting meeting. There were a lot of people there that represent scientists, researchers, consultants, farm consultants, most of the innovators in regenerative ag. And it's based off of Rick Haney's work, the Haney soil test, that's probably the most used now in the United States to understand how your soil is functioning, soil health, measuring a lot of different metrics, and then putting it together to understand what's most important. They're also starting to do, since they've had a ton of samples over the years, they're starting to look at metagenomics too, what the organisms really are that are working in the system. It's really a deep dive into understanding ecosystem and soil health on farm ecosystems and any land stewardship systems. And I think they're really getting somewhere. And I think it's something when you talk about, as we talk about some sort of a universal way of generally understanding and validating and measuring improvement, it's a lot based on the stewardship. I think they're getting down to that level now, so that we're really looking at how we determine good stewardship by using all these metrics. But hopefully they can get that video out, because I'm really looking forward to sharing it. Or, I think that, again, that Regen Ag Lab located in Nebraska is really doing some good stuff. And of course, they're connected with all the consultants, and we could then take that information and, if we, with a marketplace or something, and really bring more encouragement to the whole system and support for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate always bringing the farmer voice here onto our Regenerati News Hours. And yeah, please, when you get that video, please circulate, ping Sarah, myself, and we'll make sure it gets up into social channels. Farouk, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you for joining us. How can we help you today?
Thanks a lot. This is a really interesting conversation. So I'm Farouk. I'm the co-founder of Neutral, and we're developing derivatives for ecological assets. So I obviously think about pricing quite a bit. So my question was more around, like, what is the price discovery process for these natively issued assets, and how are you approaching that? Because I'm curious, like, how you plan to scale that too as volume increases. Like, for example, if an asset costs $40, like, where did the $40 come from, and why not like 38 or 42, 35 or 45?
It's a great question, Sarah. Yeah, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so for the marketplace MVP, we chose to just do sort of simple buy order, simple sell order as the starting point. I mean, we've been in kind of conversations about like a more complex order book, but we really decided that it just required more volume on the marketplace to justify those expanded features for price discovery. The $40 price really comes from the price that these projects chose for themselves largely in the marketplace, and what they felt their market price and their quality indication should be to the market. And I think part of what we try to do with the marketplace and the credit issuance tools at Regen is we try to let the communities that run the projects and practices define financially the quality and the price of the projects that they're developing. Because underneath each and every one of these projects, there's a project pro forma. It's like a complex financial analysis over the life of the project and what it costs to do the monitoring and the verification, what it costs to buy that land, what it costs to plant those trees, what it costs to do land covenant conservation and the legal requirements for easements in the 8 to 10 US states that have it. And these particular projects have all of those complex components that require these organizations, which are primarily US-based land trusts. They're some of the best land conservation organizations in the nation, if not the best is in this portfolio. they are nonprofits that this is the business of what they do, and it has costs, real world costs, to acquire land, to put it under conservation easement, to have a stewardship plan for it, to restore hillsides, to have staff members that do that. So the $40 price is like honestly a pretty honest reflection of what the costs of ecological restoration to a land conservation nonprofit in the United States are. And what the costs of like developing credit projects like this in the United States really are. So this is less about why 40 instead of 35 and more about gaining an authentic understanding of what the financial pro forma behind credit production and credit systems management really is. And that's really a mathematical equation. So I'll pass back to you. I see Gregory is on here. He made it at the tail end.
I know. He may be enjoying his coffee here on the West Coast, so we'll let him be unless he hits us up. James, you've been waiting really patiently. Thank you. What's on your mind?
First, thanks for working on projects like this. High quality carbon credits are going to be very important, and I hope to see a lot of this go very well. I know cost association and actually finding buyers for them can also be a challenge associated with these projects. I guess I also have questions about potential of using like first-person accounting systems and various things that are obviously lower quality, but more accessible to the general people as incentive and learning tools to help reach average people, smallholder farmers, and other people, and possibilities and thoughts on that.
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question here. Can you kind of like
Um,
rephrase
so
it for me maybe a
basically,
little?
yeah, I'm gonna try. So basically, I understand you guys are building a very high quality product, correct?
Well, I
So
think a way of putting it back is I think you and the community are building really high quality products, and we're trying to create the systems and the functions and the marketplace to bring those to market as best we can and ensure community engagement and governance. We're actually, and again, I'm maybe riffing here, but R&D, Regen Network development itself is not going to be in the heavy business of originating a bunch of ecological assets natively. It's really creating the conditions and supporting the land stewards and the project developers and being able to bring their products to market and through a system designed to elevate and package up the highest quality ecological assets possible and have a healthy marketplace where people, I think we hope that Regen Marketplace is going to be viewed as the place for the source of high integrity, high quality ecological assets, like city forest credits, all the way to the carbon plus grasslands, which was created by Regen Network Development as like a pattern level example of what is possible. So that's my quick take. Sarah, do you have a pickup on that?
no, I think that's relatively accurate. Our focus is tools, processes, and systems. It's like laying the rails or the building blocks. We want the projects and communities of practice to use real market data about how to reflect quality accurately. But we want them to define their projects and how they evaluate that quality and how they communicate that quality themselves, because there's a lot that is unique to each ecological restoration project around the world. They are all unique things and unique places and unique communities. So to me, there's a lot of sort of like boutique style credit value inside of that really is an exit from approaching carbon and ecological benefits just as a commodity. If people are just looking for high volume commodities in this marketplace, the world of Regen Network is frankly too interesting, too complex, and too high quality of what is actually being built by community members to necessarily make sense in some of those contexts. And I think that's completely fine. They're very different audiences for very different assets across this marketplace. And it really depends on what climate action you want to incentivize. And for us, I think real world ecological restoration that is local and quantifiable is is what we are focused on more than being the largest volume producer in the commodities market, for example.
So I do, James, I know you had a quick follow-up, and then I'd like to end with Mpawa's follow-up question, and then we'll tie up the day. So do you have a quick follow-up, James?
Yeah, I guess to simplify my question was, is that is there a use for lower quality credits, which are often first person accounting, to help bring in new projects who don't necessarily have the funding to qualify for the the level of third party accounting that's needed to, like I'm saying, like stepping up. I see what you guys are building is very good, but there's a large number of people who are doing projects in third world countries or in developing areas that aren't going to have the funding, and I think we need to have stepping stones to get to where you are. And that's where my interest is.
Yeah, I think it's good framing and feedback to know the direction from which you're arriving to that question. And we've had some conversations about features that don't exist yet, particularly in like the pre-financing or pre-purchasing style, of really transactional structuring. And part of the logic about exploring features like that has to do with, okay, you've got people in places that don't have the money to do the things and are learning what it takes to develop a ecological benefits project. They're new to it, and more than anything, a lot of times they need the money to change that practice, or they need the money to build that thing, or they need the money to start that project. And so I think that equity comes when we start to lean much earlier and earlier into these decision-making cycles from the perspective of the land stewards themselves, and we allow the market to reach, all the way into incubating a brand new project that, maybe there's some risk involved with that, but to certain folks in the marketplace, the ability to kind of know that they're going to get credits off of something, or to put money into innovation that could be, fantastic climate science work. There are folks that are looking for that type of future-facing control in the marketplace and really want to participate much deeper inside of the developmental cycle. So again, I mean, our marketplace MVP has specific features. A lot of these other things are under discussion, and every one of these Twitter spaces, we definitely unpack more and more what the land practice community really needs from us as a series of tools. And we ultimately try to focus on, discovering what those tools need to be that can serve as many people as possible as they use Regen Network and the blockchain of Regen Ledger, and participate in this community of practice.
Thank you, James and Sarah, for that answer. Mpawa, you've got the final follow-up question, and then I'll tie it up for the day. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just my final question would be kind of around where would the demand side come from? Well, in a perfect world where there's not a lot of companies that are emitting loads of CO2 and need to kind of sort out their balance sheet. In that scenario, where would the demand for carbon credits come from? Or is that in that scenario, is that when we would start to move to a hybrid credit, which doesn't just focus on, carbon like sequestration, but begins to factor in whatever capacity biodiversity and some of these other period things on the periodic table that aren't just carbon, right? Is that kind of the scenario, or will there still be some reason for there to be a demand for carbon credits?
Yeah, I think the world we want to live in is one that is decarbonized. So I think that there's an aspect of behavioral change on a personal and company level that is, in my opinion, still extremely early, in companies even knowing what their emissions are. Very many companies come to us and haven't even figured that out. So I think that there are aspects of action here that are earlier than we think. I also think that there is something to be said about being less reductionist. Every credit that has come into Regen Network has had in some way some sort of ecological benefits measurement that is way beyond carbon. So carbon plus grasslands had all kinds of other animal welfare and ecosystem health and other indicators that were a component of that credit. City forest credits, they look at water quality and air quality and shade tree cover and how many residents are directly adjacent. There's a lot of other measurement components that really go way beyond carbon and into the effects that that project has more broadly on the community. So I see the market becoming less rejectionist over time. I also think that there's something to be said about, at the end of the day, this is my personal opinion. This is not necessarily the official opinion of Regen Network. My personal opinion is that landscapes have value. They provide ecological benefits, and those are things that exist that we all benefit from. I do believe that carbon should be on the balance sheets of families and companies and municipalities and nation states as assets. These for us are financially quantifiable assets. And so I think less about the buyer-seller behavior mechanism and about the overall financial evolution of looking at nature as having a financial value, says that it then becomes something that is on nation states' balance sheets, on companies' balance sheets, on municipalities' balance sheets, as something that is a financial asset. Therefore, it is something that there is a financial incentivization around maintaining that asset on the balance sheet to protect it, to restore it, to, make something of that place that serves the future of the planet and not just the reductionist sort of get carbon under control, frankly, carbon accounting challenge that we will have for the next decade. So I envision something bigger and broader, and we are just building the toolkit that helps us move in that direction.
That's a great way to tie up our day. I think Sarah nailed it on the head in closing out today's. First, the post-marketplace launch Twitter space is really great questions from all of you who participated and joined in. We'd love all of you to just take a spin around the marketplace. We'd love your constructive criticism and feedback of what you like, what you don't like. Again, we're really at just the beginning. It was a major milestone for Regen Network development and the Regen Network community as a whole. But yeah, it really is just the start. And we're pretty bullish, very excited, and we'll be, we haven't stopped building. It only is inspired more, I think, both within us as a team and reinvigorated our work as well as the community that hopefully we'll be building with us. So with that, I think that ties up our day. We'll be back next Thursday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern for the Regenerati News Hour. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Appreciate it. Have a great day.